on your knees! Mall thieves don't get dignity in my parking lot!
Sergeant Rusk shoved Elias Boone forward, forcing him down onto the rough pavement as gravel pressed through his clothes and into an old injury that flared with pain. The parking lot fell into a tense hush, broken only by the quiet buzz of phones recording. Rusk held up a worn watch between two fingers, letting it swing like it meant nothing.
Stolen property,
he said loudly, making sure the crowd caught every word. Officer Voss lingered nearby, watching the growing circle of onlookers. Rusk thought he had found another frightened man to humiliate in public, another easy target to break. But Elias didn't react, his posture rigid, expression steady, like he was waiting. Across the lot, engines rolled in low and controlled as black Pentagon SUVs began closing in around them. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. Elias Boone adjusted his reading glasses as he entered Fairbridge Commons Mall. The cold air followed him inside before the automatic doors whispered shut. Saturday shoppers bustled around him, but Elias moved with purpose. He patted his pocket where the claim ticket rested, the last link to Lila. His sister had been gone 3 months now. The watch repair had been scheduled before her death, and retrieving it felt like completing a final errand for her. The mall smelled of pretzels and floor cleaner. Music hummed from hidden speakers, cheerful in a way that felt forced. Elias spotted the jewelry kiosk near the center court. As he approached, he noticed a security guard shift positions, angling to watch him. The guard spoke quietly into a radio clipped to his shoulder. Strange, Elias thought. He straightened his posture, a habit from his military days, and continued walking. The young woman behind the kiosk counter looked up as he approached. Her name tag read Marissa. When Elias handed her the claim ticket, her eyes widened slightly. "You're here for the Boone watch?" she asked, voice lower than necessary. "Yes. My sister's timepiece." Marissa nodded, glancing around before turning to the locked drawer behind her. She removed a small box and placed it on the counter, sliding it toward Elias. "It's fixed now." The mechanism was just stuck. Her hands trembled slightly. Elias opened the box. Inside lay his father's watch, the one he'd given Leela when Elias joined the Air Force. The engraving on the back caught the light. "Time reveals truth." "Thank you," Elias said. Marissa leaned closer. "Your sister said, if anyone came asking, I should give you the second receipt too." She slipped a folded paper into his palm. Before Elias could ask what she meant, a sharp voice cut through the mall chatter. "Sir, I need you to step aside." Elias turned to find a woman in a tailored suit standing beside a uniformed police officer. Her blazer bore a silver pin that read, "Director." "Gloria Pike," she said, without offering her hand. "Mall security." Behind her stood 2 police officers. The older one, gray at the temples, shoulders squared with authority, had sergeant stripes. His nameplate read, Rusk. The younger officer, Voss, hung back, eyes scanning the growing crowd. "Is there a problem?" Elias asked, pocketing the receipt. Pike's eyes narrowed. "That depends on you, sir." Before Elias could respond, a woman's voice rose from behind them. "That's him! That's the man who took my purse!" A middle-aged white woman pointed at Elias, her hand shaking dramatically. "I felt him bump into me near the food court." Elias blinked in confusion. "Ma'am, I haven't been to the food court. I just arrived at the mall." Sergeant Rusk stepped forward. "Sir, we need to discuss this situation." "There's nothing to discuss," Elias said calmly. "Check your security cameras. I walked directly from the entrance to this kiosk." Rusk's jaw tightened. "We don't take instructions from suspects." "Suspects?" Elias kept his voice level. "I'm not a suspect in anything. I'm here picking up my sister's watch." Pike crossed her arms. "Our witness says differently." "Then review the footage," Elias insisted. "That will clear this up immediately." "Sir," Rusk said, his tone hardening, "you're creating a disturbance in a private establishment." Elias looked around at the curious onlookers. "I'm speaking in a normal voice. I'm suggesting a reasonable solution. Officer Voss shifted uncomfortably. You match the description of someone involved in several thefts around the mall. Rusk continued, ignoring Elias's logic. What description would that be? Elias asked. Rusk didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the exit. Step outside with us, please. I'd like your badge numbers first, Elias said. Something flashed in Rusk's eyes, a cold anger that transformed his professional demeanor. That sounds like resistance to me. Requesting badge numbers is my right as a citizen, Elias replied. From across the corridor, a young woman with braided hair pulled out her phone and began recording. Tessa. Elias had told her to wait by the food court while he picked up the watch. Rusk noticed her too. Officer Voss, handle that. As Voss started toward Tessa, Elias felt his calm slipping. You touch that girl, and every choice you made today becomes federal. Pike raised an eyebrow. Threatening an officer now? Not threatening. Informing. Elias turned back to Rusk. That's my grandniece. Rusk smirked. Sir, place your hands where I can see them. Elias did so, aware of the growing audience. The woman who'd accused him had disappeared into the crowd. The watch, Rusk demanded, nodding toward Elias's pocket. It belongs to my family, Elias said. Rusk reached forward and removed the watch box from Elias's coat pocket. Evidence of theft, until proven otherwise. Pike watched with cold satisfaction as Rusk grabbed Elias's upper arm and began steering him toward the exit. You're making a serious mistake, Elias said quietly. Move, Rusk ordered, shoving him toward the parking lot doors. The automatic doors of Fairbridge Commons slid open, and Sergeant Rusk pushed Elias out into the cold afternoon air. A group of shoppers near the entrance stopped to stare. Rusk marched Elias toward the handicap parking area, his hand gripping Elias's arm tightly. Over there, Rusk ordered, pointing to a spot between two police cruisers. Elias stood tall despite the pressure on his arm. His eyes scanned the growing crowd of onlookers. Some pulled out phones, others whispered behind their hands. Kneel down, Rusk commanded. Elias didn't move. Sergeant, I have an old service injury. Kneeling on pavement will... I said kneel! Rusk's voice boomed across the parking lot. Officer Voss stood nearby, eyes darting between Rusk and the gathering crowd. His hand rested uncertainly on his belt. Sir, Voss said quietly, maybe we should... Officer Voss, Rusk snapped. Secure the perimeter. Voss hesitated, then nodded and stepped away. Rusk pressed down on Elias's shoulder. Last warning. With painful slowness, Elias lowered himself to one knee, then the other. Sharp gravel bit into his skin through his pants. His left knee, damaged years ago during his service, throbbed with immediate pain. Palms up, where I can see them, Rusk ordered. Elias complied, opening his hands at chest level. His reading glasses fell from his coat pocket, landing on the asphalt. Rusk's boot came down, crushing them with a sickening crack. A little boy in the crowd tugged on his grandmother's sleeve. Why is that man on the ground? No one answered him. Rusk stood over Elias, one hand hovering near his holster. Sir, you made this harder than it needed to be. Elias looked up, his face a mask of calm that concealed the fire building in his chest. No, Sergeant. You made it exactly what you wanted it to be. Tessa pushed through the crowd, her phone held high, recording everything. Uncle Elias! Voss moved toward her. Miss, I need you to stop filming and hand over that device. You touch that girl, Elias said, his voice dangerously quiet. And every choice you made today becomes federal. Rusk laughed. Federal? Sir, you are in a mall parking lot with stolen property in your pocket. He pulled Lila's watch from Elias's coat pocket and held it up like a trophy. This is evidence in an ongoing investigation. That belonged to my sister, Elias said, his voice tight with controlled fury. Rusk's smile widened. Then I'm sure she will be happy to explain it. A terrible silence fell over the crowd. Tessa's voice cracked through the stillness like a whip. She's dead! Rusk's expression didn't change. But something flickered in his eyes. Not regret, but calculation. Elias felt humiliation burn through his restraint. His sister's watch, the last piece of her he had, dangled from Rusk's fingers like trash. His knees screamed with pain. Shoppers stared. And still, he remained controlled, even as rage built beneath his calm exterior. "Get your cuffs, Voss," Rusk called. A distant rumble cut through the tension. At first it was just a sound, the deep purr of a powerful engine. Then movement at the far end of the parking lot. A black SUV with government plates turned into the entrance. Rusk glanced over his shoulder, annoyed at the interruption. Another black SUV appeared, then a third. Voss stepped back from Tessa, his hand dropping from his cuff pouch. "Sarge!" The first SUV accelerated smoothly, followed by the others in perfect formation. They moved with military precision, fanning out across the parking area. 4 SUVs, 5, 6. Rusk's hand tightened around the watch. "What is this?" 7, 8, 9. The vehicles surrounded the police cruisers without touching them, creating an impenetrable barrier. Each bore the same unmarked appearance. Government issue with tinted windows. 10 black Pentagon SUVs, positioned like chess pieces in a winning formation. The driver's door of the lead vehicle opened. Then all the doors opened, almost simultaneously. Men and women in dark jackets stepped out. Their movements were synchronized, unhurried but purposeful. On their backs, clear white lettering. Department of Defense. Office of Inspector General. Rusk's face drained of color. The watch in his hand trembled slightly. Elias remained on his knees, but something had changed in his eyes. The humiliation was gone. What remained was steady, certain, and unafraid. A tall woman with steel-gray hair stepped out of the lead SUV. Her posture was military straight, her gaze unwavering as she surveyed the scene. The insignia on her jacket marked her as a high-ranking officer. "Colonel Deborah Haynes, Department of Defense Inspector General's office," she announced, her voice carrying across the now silent parking lot. She walked directly toward Elias, ignoring Rusk's attempt to intercept her. "Ma'am, this is an active police matter," Rusk said, shifting to block her path. Colonel Haynes looked him up and down with cold assessment. "No, Sergeant. This is now a federal obstruction matter." She turned to 2 agents behind her. "Get him up." The agents moved quickly to Elias, helping him rise from the pavement. Elias winced as his injured knee straightened, but he kept his dignity intact, refusing to show more pain than necessary. "Are you all right, Mr. Boone?" Haynes asked. "I'll manage, Colonel," Elias replied, brushing gravel from his pants. A younger woman with a sharp gaze approached, camera in hand. "Federal Attorney Avery Sloan," she introduced herself. "Hold still, please." She began photographing Elias's scuffed knees, the dirt on his clothing, then his broken glasses lying near the police cruiser. "Those two," she said, pointing at Lila's watch still clutched in Rusk's hand. She snapped several photos of it before Rusk could react. "This is ridiculous," Rusk sputtered, his confidence visibly cracking. "We received a theft complaint, which you failed to investigate properly," Sloan cut in. "Instead, choosing to publicly humiliate a federal investigator without cause." The crowd murmured in surprise. Shoppers who had been watching from a fearful distance began edging closer, phones recording. Elias straightened his coat with trembling hands, not from fear, but from the contained fury and pain of the last 15 minutes. His voice, when he spoke, was steady and clear. "Sergeant Rusk, you have no idea how long we've been looking at you." Rusk's face flushed. "What are you talking about?" "Elias Boone, Pentagon civilian investigator, attached to the Federal Oversight Task Force on Law Enforcement Accountability," Elias said. "Your unit has been under review for months." The revelation hit Rusk like a physical blow. His hand tightened around the watch. "That's impossible," he stammered. "You can't just—" "We can," Colonel Haynes said. "And we did. Your actions today have only accelerated matters." Tessa rushed over to her great-uncle, her phone still recording. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I'm fine," Elias assured her, though his knee throbbed painfully. An elderly black woman with silver hair pushed through the growing crowd. She wore a church dress and carried herself with quiet dignity. "That man did not do a thing wrong," she announced, pointing at Elias. "And he is not the first." She turned to Colonel Haynes. "I'm Ruthie Bell, retired nurse. I've been watching this parking lot for 3 years. Got a notebook full of names and badge numbers." Her words broke the dam. Other voices rose from the crowd. "They searched my truck twice last month," called an older veteran with a Vietnam War cap. "Said I matched a description." "Never said what description." A grandmother with a medical walking stick stepped forward. "They banned my grandson for loitering while waiting for my prescription." "Called him threatening." "Officer warned me to sell my lease," added a black shop owner from the mall. "Said something unfortunate might happen to my business otherwise." With each new voice, Rusk's face grew darker. The crowd that had watched in fearful silence minutes earlier now pressed closer, emboldened by the federal presence. Attorney Sloan stepped directly in front of Rusk, hand outstretched. "The watch, Sergeant." "Now." Rusk hesitated, glancing around for support. Officer Voss had backed away, his expression conflicted. "You can hand it over," Sloan continued, her voice steely. "Or I can add theft of federal evidence to the list we're building in real time." With visible reluctance, Rusk placed the watch in her palm. She immediately handed it to Elias, who closed his fingers around it, feeling the familiar weight of his sister's last possession. "This isn't over," Rusk said quietly, his eyes locked on Elias. The threat in his gaze was unmistakable. Elias met his stare evenly. "You're right about that, Sergeant. It's just beginning." Colonel Haynes motioned to her team. "Secure the area. I want statements from everyone who witnessed this incident." She turned to Rusk. "You and Officer Voss will remain on site until we've completed our initial assessment." The parking lot had transformed from a place of humiliation to a scene of reckoning. The balance of power had shifted dramatically, but the tension in the air made one thing clear. This confrontation was far from resolved. Elias sat in the back of the black SUV, holding his sister's watch. His finger traced the scratched glass face, while Colonel Haynes spoke quietly into her phone in the front seat. Tessa leaned against his shoulder, her earlier bravado replaced by silent exhaustion. Through the tinted windows, he could see Attorney Sloan coordinating with other agents outside the mall entrance. "Elias," Haynes said, turning toward him, "the address on that second receipt, it's a storage facility off Jefferson Highway." Elias nodded. "Drive Easy Storage. Lila used to keep seasonal decorations there. We need to secure whatever she left before anyone else does," Haynes said, her voice tight with urgency. 20 minutes later, their small convoy pulled into the storage facility's gravel lot. The place was quiet on a Saturday afternoon, rows of orange metal doors gleaming under the winter sun. Elias felt a strange hollowness as they approached Unit 817, the number matching the second receipt from the jewelry kiosk. "Stand back," Colonel Haynes instructed as 2 agents prepared to cut the padlock. "We don't know what we're walking into." The lock fell away with a metallic snap. Avery Sloan pulled on latex gloves and slid the door upward. The sound of metal scraping against metal filled the cold air. Elias felt Tessa's hand tighten around his arm as the unit's interior came into view. "It's empty," she whispered. The storage locker contained none of the expected files or evidence. No boxes of documents, no recordings, no flash drives. The concrete floor was swept clean, except for a single manila envelope lying in the center of the floor. "Nobody touch it," Haynes ordered. One of her agents photographed the envelope from multiple angles before Avery carefully picked it up with gloved hands. "It's been opened," she noted, sliding out a single photograph. The image showed Lila Boone standing beside Mayor Nolan Bryce at what appeared to be a redevelopment ceremony. They were cutting a ribbon in front of a construction site. Lila's smile looked forced. The mayor's hand rested on her shoulder in a way that made Elias's jaw tighten. Avery turned the photograph over. On the back, written in Lila's neat handwriting, "If the watch reaches Elias, they already know." A heavy silence fell over the group. "They knew we were coming," Elias said quietly. "Someone removed everything before we got here." "Which means someone knew about the receipt," Haynes added. "And about you retrieving the watch today." "The jewelry clerk," Tessa said suddenly. "She seemed scared." Elias closed his eyes briefly. "They've been watching since Lila died. Maybe before." A sharp electronic ping cut through the tension. Tessa pulled her phone from her pocket, then froze, her face draining of color. "What is it?" Elias asked, moving to her side. She held out the phone. The message on the screen came from an unknown number. "Tell your uncle to leave Fairbridge before your family loses someone else." Colonel Haynes immediately took the phone. "We'll trace this. In the meantime, both of you need protected housing until we understand the full scope of the threat." "I'm not leaving Aunt Lila's house," Tessa said, her voice suddenly fierce. "That's all we have left of her." "Tessa," Elias began. "No," she cut him off. "If we leave, they win. That's what they want. They've already taken Aunt Lila, taken her evidence. I won't let them take her home too." Avery Sloane stepped closer. "We can secure the house, post agents. But Tessa's right. Leaving could compromise the investigation. Whoever sent this message wants Elias gone because he represents a threat." Haynes looked displeased, but nodded. "We'll establish a protective detail, and we need to move faster. This isn't just harassment anymore. It's obstruction of a federal investigation." Elias stared at the empty storage unit, the realization settling over him like a physical weight. The confrontation in the parking lot hadn't been the culmination of anything. It was merely the opening move in a much larger game. Someone powerful enough to remove evidence ahead of a federal team was watching their every step. Someone connected enough to get Elias's private phone number. Someone desperate enough to threaten a 17-year-old girl. "Lila knew," he said finally, his voice low. "She knew they'd come after her evidence if she died. That's why she left the message on the photo." Tessa looked up at her great-uncle, fear and determination mingling in her eyes. "What do we do now?" Elias's hand closed around his sister's watch. "We follow her lead. Lila wouldn't have sent me here if she didn't have a backup plan. She was always 3 steps ahead, even as a child." He turned to Colonel Haynes. "We need to find whoever sent that text. And I need to understand exactly what Lila discovered that got her killed." The cold winter light slanted through the storage unit's open door, illuminating the empty space where answers should have been. Outside, the world continued as normal. Cars passing on the highway, people shopping, families going about their Saturday routines, unaware that in this quiet corner of Fairbridge, a battle line had just been drawn. The porch light flickered as they approached Lila's modest 2-bedroom house. Dead leaves skittered across the walkway. 2 federal agents had already arrived and swept the property, confirming it was clear but showing concern about its vulnerability. Too many ground-floor windows, poor sightlines from the street. "Home, sweet home," Tessa said, her voice hollow as she unlocked the front door. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. Lila's reading glasses still on the coffee table, mail neatly stacked on the kitchen counter, family photos lining the hallway. But Elias noticed the subtle wrongness immediately. The air felt disturbed, like someone had moved through recently who didn't belong. "Something's off," he said, running his finger along the edge of a drawer left slightly ajar in the living room. Tessa hung her coat on the rack by the door. "The police came after she died. Said they needed to secure the property. I wasn't allowed to watch what they did." Elias moved to the family photos on the wall. 3 generations of Boones smiled back at him, but the frames sat at slightly wrong angles. Someone had removed them, looked behind them, and replaced them carelessly. "They were searching," he said. "Not securing." Colonel Haynes took a call outside while Avery Sloane checked the kitchen, her sharp eyes cataloging details. "Elias," Avery said, keeping her voice even. I need to be clear about something. Your personal connection to this case is problematic. I'm aware, he said, straightening a photo of himself and Lila at his wedding years ago. If this goes to court, when this goes to court, the defense will argue that evidence was compromised because you're emotionally invested. They'll claim you planted things, manipulated witnesses, pushed a narrative. I don't care what they claim. You should, Avery's voice sharpened. Because if we don't maintain an airtight evidence chain, Rusk walks, Pike walks, anyone involved walks. And your sister gets no justice. Tessa stood in the doorway, arms crossed tight against her chest. She's right, Uncle Elias. Elias walked to Lila's small desk by the window. The surface was clear except for a landline phone and a cup of pens. He pulled open the top drawer. Empty. No notebook, no papers. She kept records of everything, he said. Always has, since we were kids. There should be a notebook here. He ran his fingers over the desktop, feeling a slight indentation in the wood. Pressure marks from a pen pressing through paper. Lila had written something here before she died. We need better light, he said. Avery handed him her phone with the flashlight on. Elias held it at an angle across the desk surface, revealing the faint impression of writing. I can't make it out, he said in frustration. It's too faint. Tessa disappeared down the hall and returned with a pencil. Let me try something. She gently rubbed the side of the lead across a piece of paper laid over the indentation, a technique she'd learned in art class. Slowly, letters appeared. Not complete words, just fragments. 817, and what looked like church. 817? Avery asked. A time? An address? Maybe a Bible verse, Tessa suggested. Aunt Lila went to First Baptist every Sunday. The conversation halted as headlights swept across the living room wall. Outside, a patrol car crept slowly past the house, its light bar dark. Tessa froze. That's him. That's Rusk's car. Stay away from the windows, Avery ordered, moving to the front door to check the lock. The patrol car continued down the street, then circled the block. 5 minutes later, it passed by again, slower this time. Tessa's breathing quickened. We need to leave. They're watching us. No, Elias said firmly, placing his hands on her shoulders. We're not running. That's what they want. He moved to the front window and carefully shifted the curtain an inch. The patrol car had stopped under a street light half a block away. Even from this distance, Elias could make out Sergeant Rusk's silhouette behind the wheel. He's trying to scare us, Elias said, letting the curtain fall back into place. It's working, Tessa whispered. Elias turned to face his grandniece, Colonel Haynes, and Avery. Lila stood her ground. She stayed in Fairbridge when she found something wrong. We'll do the same. He double-checked the door lock, then moved systematically through the house, securing windows. Through the kitchen blinds, he could still see Rusk's cruiser, a predator waiting in the darkness. Morning light filtered through Lila's kitchen curtains, casting soft shadows across the worn table where Elias sat, with a cup of black coffee. Tessa slumped in the chair beside him, dark circles under her eyes betraying her sleepless night. Avery stood by the counter, phone in hand, her sharp gaze fixed on the small television mounted in the corner. Coming up next, the local news anchor announced with practiced concern, tensions at Fairbridge Commons Mall as a Pentagon official is detained during a theft investigation. Elias straightened, his cup pausing halfway to his lips. The screen filled with footage of him already on his knees in the parking lot. The beginning, when Rusk had forced him down, despite his protests about his injured knee, was conveniently missing. A disturbance at Fairbridge Commons yesterday led to the brief detention of a federal employee, the reporter explained. The incident, which drew significant attention when federal vehicles arrived at the scene, remains under investigation. Brief detention? Tessa snapped, her voice cracking. They threw you on the ground. The footage cut to Mayor Nolan Bryce, his silver hair perfectly combed, standing in front of City Hall. His face carried a practiced expression of concern. We support our local law enforcement officers who work tirelessly to keep our community safe, Bryce said, his voice smooth as oil. While we welcome all visitors to Fairbridge, we ask that outside agencies respect our local procedures and not interfere with ongoing police matters." "That lying snake!" Tessa hissed. The anchor reappeared. "Sergeant Dale Rusk has been placed on paid administrative leave pending review of the incident." "Paid leave?" Tessa slammed her palm on the table. "That's not punishment. That's a vacation." Elias rubbed his temples. "It's standard procedure." "It's garbage," Tessa shot back. Avery muted the television and turned to face them. "This is exactly what I warned you about, Elias. They're attacking your credibility before we can bring evidence forward. They're making Uncle Elias sound like some troublemaker who came here to start problems," Tessa said, her voice trembling with anger. "That's the strategy," Avery agreed. "Paint Elias as an outsider interfering with local police. Make the community question his motives." Elias's phone buzzed. Colonel Haynes's name flashed on the screen. "Haynes," he answered, putting the call on speaker. "I've got updates." The colonel's voice filled the kitchen. "Our formal request for incident reports involving the mall has hit roadblocks. City attorney says they need additional time to comply. Meanwhile, we've discovered 17 complaints filed against Rusk's unit in the past year, all dismissed without investigation." "Any progress on the locker contents?" Elias asked. "Nothing yet. Security cameras in that facility had technical issues during the critical time frame." "Convenient," Avery muttered. "Very." Haynes's voice hardened. "We're pushing through official channels, but someone's working overtime to slow us down." Elias tapped his fingers on the table, thinking, "We need witnesses, real people, real stories, before this narrative about me being a troublemaker gets locked in." "I agree," Haynes replied. "We need to connect the dots faster than they can erase them." After ending the call, Elias stared at the silent television where B-roll footage of the mall played beneath a scrolling headline, "Questions surround federal presence at local mall incident." "They're trying to make this about you," Avery said, "instead of about what's really happening in Fairbridge." "People know the truth," Tessa insisted. "They've seen how Rusk acts." "Fear keeps people quiet," Elias replied. "We need to find those brave enough to speak." Tessa's phone chimed with a notification. She pulled it from her pocket, her expression darkening as she read the screen. "What is it?" Elias asked. Tessa's hand trembled slightly. "Email from school. I'm supposed to report to the principal's office at 3 today for an emergency disciplinary meeting." She looked up, eyes wide. "It says, regarding conduct unbecoming a Fairbridge scholar and potential violation of school technology policies." She turned the phone so Elias could see. "They're saying I violated school policy by posting that video of your arrest." "That's retaliation," Avery said immediately, her attorney instincts flaring. Elias felt a cold fury settle in his chest. "First they came after me. Now they're coming after a 17-year-old girl's future." Tessa's face paled. "My scholarship. If they put a disciplinary mark on my record—" Elias reached across the table and took her hand. "That's not going to happen." "You don't know that," Tessa whispered. "I do know that," Elias said firmly. "Because I'm going with you to that meeting." That afternoon, Elias and Tessa arrived at Fairbridge High School. The hallways were nearly empty as most students had already gone home for the day. Their footsteps echoed against the polished floor tiles as they made their way to the administration office. "Remember," Elias said quietly, "you did nothing wrong. Keep your head up." Tessa nodded, but her fingers nervously twisted the strap of her backpack. The morning news broadcast had shaken her confidence. If they could twist what happened to Elias into making him look guilty, what would they do to her? The school secretary looked up from her desk. "Tessa Boone? Principal Harmon is expecting you." Her eyes flicked to Elias. "Just Tessa. I'm her legal guardian while she's in my care," Elias stated firmly. "She's a minor. I'll be joining the meeting." The secretary's lips tightened, but she picked up her phone. After a brief exchange, she nodded reluctantly. "Go on in." Principal Harmon's office was wood-paneled with framed diplomas and sports trophies displayed prominently. The principal himself, a thin man with thinning hair and glasses, stood as they entered. He wasn't alone. A uniformed school resource officer leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Ms. Boone, Mr. Boone, please have a seat." Principal Harmon gestured to 2 chairs opposite his desk. Elias noted how the principal positioned himself between them and the door. How the officer maintained his standing position. Small intimidation tactics. "Tessa, we've received concerning reports about your online activities," Principal Harmon began, folding his hands on his desk. "Specifically, statements that could be interpreted as threatening toward our local police department." Tessa's head snapped up. "What? I didn't threaten anyone." "You posted video footage with inflammatory commentary." "She posted a video showing what actually happened," Elias interrupted. "What specifically did she write that constitutes a threat?" The principal shuffled through papers on his desk, not meeting their eyes. "The post itself creates a hostile environment and undermines respect for authority figures." "Show us the threatening language," Elias insisted. Principal Harmon cleared his throat. "The issue isn't just the language, but the context, and—" "There were no threats," Elias stated flatly. "She documented a public incident that happened to her family member. That's protected speech." The school resource officer shifted his weight. "Kids these days don't understand the consequences of what they post online." Elias turned slowly to face him. "And what consequences would those be, officer?" The tension in the room thickened. Principal Harmon quickly intervened. "The point is, Tessa, this kind of behavior doesn't align with the values we expect from scholarship recipients. I'm afraid we'll need to place your recommendation on hold pending a behavioral review." Tessa went pale. "But that recommendation is due next week." "Unfortunately, your actions have consequences." "Her actions?" Elias's voice remained calm, but steel ran beneath it. "Recording a public incident is her right. This isn't about her behavior. This is about silencing a witness." The principal's eyes darted nervously to the officer and back. "Mr. Boone, I understand you're upset, but—" "Who filed the complaint?" Elias asked directly. "I'm not at liberty to—" "Was it the school board? A teacher? Another student?" Elias leaned forward. "Or did it come from outside the school entirely?" Principal Harmon's uncomfortable silence was answer enough. "This complaint came from City Hall, didn't it?" Elias pressed. The principal's facade cracked. "We have to maintain relationships with local officials. The mayor's office expressed concerns about the—" "The mayor's office has no authority over student speech," Elias stated. "This meeting is over. Tessa's scholarship recommendation will proceed as planned, or we'll be discussing this matter with federal education officials about political retaliation against a minor." The principal paled. "Mr. Boone, please understand my position." "I understand completely. You received pressure and decided a 17-year-old's future was acceptable collateral damage." Elias stood, motioning for Tessa to do the same. "We're done here." Outside in the parking lot, Tessa's composure finally broke. Her shoulders shook as tears spilled down her cheeks. "They can just do that?" she whispered. "Take everything away with one phone call?" Elias pulled her into a hug, feeling her tears dampen his shoulder. "No, they can't. Not when we fight back." "But my scholarship—" "Your future is not theirs to steal," Elias said firmly. "You earned that scholarship. They don't get to hold it hostage because you told the truth." Tessa pulled back, wiping her eyes. "What if they do it anyway? Then we expose that too." Elias's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. "It's Avery," he answered, putting it on speaker. "We just left the school. They're trying to threaten Tessa's scholarship." "Doesn't surprise me," Avery replied. "Listen, I've got news. Ruthie Bell called. Says she has evidence of years of harassment at the mall. Documentation, dates, names. She's been keeping records all along." "Ruthie Bell? The retired nurse?" Elias asked. "The same. She says she needs to talk to you before—" "Her words. They get to her too." Elias glanced at Tessa, then back at his phone. "Text me her address. We're on our way." He ended the call and turned to Tessa. Change of plans. We're going to see Ms. Bell right now. Now? Tessa asked, still wiping tears. Now, Elias confirmed, opening the car door, before anyone can frighten her into silence. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Ruthie Bell's front yard as Elias, Tessa, and Avery approached her modest home. The small blue house sat 2 streets behind the church, its porch adorned with potted plants and a gently swinging bench. Elias knocked firmly on the door. "Coming! Coming!" called a voice from inside. The door opened to reveal Ruthie Bell, a dignified black woman in her 70s, wearing a floral blouse and pressed slacks despite being at home. Her silver hair was pulled back neatly, and her eyes were sharp behind reading glasses. "Mr. Boone," she said, nodding respectfully. About time someone listened. She ushered them in quickly, checking the street before closing the door. The living room was modest but immaculate. Family photos lined the walls, and a Bible sat open on a small reading table. Ruthie directed them to sit on her floral-patterned sofa. "Can I get you anything? Tea? Water?" she asked. "We're fine, Ms. Bell," Elias said. "Avery told me you have information about the mall." Ruthie nodded, her expression hardening. "More than information. Evidence!" She walked to a bookshelf and removed a thick spiral notebook hidden between photo albums. 3 years of their foolishness. Right here. She handed the notebook to Elias. Inside were meticulous handwritten entries, organized by date, with names, times, badge numbers, and descriptions of incidents. "My Harold, God rest him, was a postal worker for 40 years, Ruthie explained, sitting in her armchair. "He always said, when people lie for a living, write things down. So that's what I did." Elias flipped through the pages. "This is extraordinary, Miss Bell. Call me Ruthie. Everyone does." The notebook documented dozens of incidents. Seniors questioned for loitering while waiting for prescriptions. A disabled veteran searched twice in 1 week. Black teenagers banned for sitting too long in the food court. An elderly man in a wheelchair accused of blocking an entrance. Each entry included the officers involved. Rusk's name appeared repeatedly, along with Voss, Mall Security Chief Gloria Pike, and several guards identified by badge numbers. "You've been documenting all this by yourself?" Avery asked, examining a page. "Someone had to," Ruthie said simply. "Nobody was listening." Tessa leaned forward. "Did my aunt know about this notebook?" Ruthie's eyes softened. "Lila?" "Yes, child. She came to see me 2 days before we lost her." Her voice cracked slightly. "That's what I needed to tell you." Elias looked up. "What did she say?" "She was worried. More than usual." Ruthie adjusted her glasses. "Said she'd found something in those redevelopment papers she was organizing. Said, they are not just harassing people, they're making money from it." I asked her what that meant, but she wouldn't say more. Just that she needed time to make copies. "Making money?" Elias repeated. "From harassment? That's what troubled her so. It wasn't just prejudice, though Lord knows that's part of it. It was about dollars and cents, too." Ruthie sighed deeply. "I should have made her tell me more." Before Elias could respond, the front window exploded. Glass sprayed across the room as a brick crashed onto Ruthie's carpet. Tessa screamed, ducking behind the sofa. "Get down!" Elias shouted, lunging toward Ruthie. He shielded her with his body, pulling her to the floor as glass fragments rained around them. Avery was already on her phone. "Colonel Haynes, we need a team at Ruthie Bell's house, now!" She crawled toward the brick, using her jacket to pick it up. A note was tied to it with twine. "What does it say?" Ruthie demanded, still sheltered by Elias's arm. Avery's face darkened as she read, "Old women should forget things." Tessa's eyes went wide. "They were listening to us?" "Or they've been watching the house," Elias said, helping Ruthie to her feet. "Are you hurt?" "Just my pride," Ruthie said, brushing glass from her clothes. "And my window." She straightened her shoulders. "They think they can scare an old woman? After what they did to Lila?" We should get you to a safe location, Avery said. Colonel Haynes can arrange protection. I'm not hiding, Ruthie declared, her voice firm despite a slight tremor in her hands. Lila died because nobody listened soon enough. I won't disappear when the truth finally has a chance. Elias pulled out his phone and began photographing the brick, the note, and the shattered window. The glass pattern suggests it was thrown from the street, he noted, examining the spray pattern. Broad daylight. Multiple witnesses possible. They're getting desperate, Avery observed. Elias nodded, his expression grim. To threaten an elderly witness in daylight? Yes, they're desperate. And that makes them more dangerous. He turned to Ruthie, who stood amid the glass of her broken window, clutching her notebook to her chest. Despite everything, she looked defiant rather than afraid. We need to copy this notebook, Elias said. Multiple copies. Different locations. Already done, Ruthie replied with a small, fierce smile. I may be old, Mr. Boone, but I'm not foolish. Lila taught me that much. The basement of Fairbridge First Baptist Church smelled of old hymnals and coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Elias, Tessa, Avery, and Ruthie gathered around 3 folding tables pushed together. Federal agents stood guard outside, their presence both reassuring and a stark reminder of the danger. Pastor James didn't ask questions, Ruthie said, smoothing her notebook on the table. Just said, use it as long as you need. Avery spread documents across the tables in neat rows. Ruthie's notebook, the photo of Lila with Mayor Bryce, public zoning records, police incident reports, and mall security logs they'd managed to subpoena. We need to find what Lila saw, Elias said, studying the photograph. His sister stood beside Mayor Bryce at some redevelopment ceremony, her smile tight and professional. Nothing in her expression hinted at suspicion, but Elias knew his sister. She noticed everything. Tessa paced the perimeter. Someone threw a brick at Ruthie. And they've been watching us. How are we supposed to feel safe anywhere? By fighting back with evidence, Avery replied, laying out another stack of papers. The truth doesn't disappear when threatened. It just needs protection until it can be heard. Ruthie flipped through her notebook, pointing to entries. Here, April 12th. Mr. Washington banned from mall for loitering. He was waiting for his granddaughter. May 3rd, the Thompson sisters accused of shoplifting. Nothing found, but police made them empty purses in public. June 8th, Mr. Diaz's food truck permit revoked after customer complaints. No customers ever complained. Avery connected these entries to official records. Each incident has a corresponding police report, all filed by Rusk's unit. Elias studied the city zoning maps beside the incident reports. These aren't random. Look at the addresses. He traced a pattern around the mall. They form a corridor. The Clean Corridor Initiative, Avery said, pulling out a glossy brochure. Mayor Bryce's signature project. The brochure showed smiling families in front of renovated storefronts. The subtitle read, Revitalizing Fairbridge Through Safety and Economic Growth. This isn't revitalization, Ruthie said bitterly. It's removal. Elias laid incident reports in chronological order, creating a timeline. Pike identifies targets. Rusk creates incidents. The reports justify declaring areas high crime or economically distressed. Then property values drop, Avery continued. Homes get bought cheap. Businesses sell under pressure. Tessa picked up a report. All these people are either black, elderly, veterans, or small business owners who can't afford lawyers. They prey on people without power, Ruthie said. Then call it progress. Elias found Lila's signature on copied complaint forms. My sister was building a case. By herself. Pride mingled with grief as he traced her handwriting. She wasn't just a records clerk, Avery noted. She was collecting evidence. Ruthie nodded. That's why she told me they were making money. The harassment itself was profitable. For developers, Elias said, examining property records. There's a company called Fairbridge Future LLC buying everything in the corridor. Avery pulled up incorporation documents on her laptop. Guess who owns 30%? Mayor Bryce's brother-in-law. Tessa slammed her hand on the table. So they're using police to scare people away from their homes, then buying them cheap? And Lila found out, Elias said quietly. Avery's phone rang. It's Colonel Haynes. She put it on speaker. We recovered something, Haynes said, her voice crackling through the phone. A deleted 911 dispatch record from the night Lila died. The room went still. Even the buzzing lights seemed to quiet. The call came from Lila's house at 9:42 p.m., Haynes continued. She reported someone trying to enter through her back door. Did they send officers? Avery asked. Yes, one unit responded. Officer Caleb Voss. Elias's hands tightened into fists. Voss, the same officer from the mall. There's more, Haynes said. The medical examiner's report lists time of death between 10:15 and 10:45 p.m. Voss reported arriving at 10:05 and finding no disturbance. He was there when she died, Elias whispered. The original dispatch record was deleted from city systems, Haynes said. We only found it in state backups. The implications hung heavy in the church basement. Lila called for help. Voss responded. She died. I need to speak with Officer Voss, Elias said, his voice controlled despite the rage building inside him. We're trying to locate him, Haynes replied. He didn't report for duty today. He's running, Avery muttered. Or they're hiding him, Ruthie added. Elias stared at the photo of Lila one more time, his sister's warning echoing in his mind. If the watch reaches Elias, they already know. She'd known the risks. She'd tried to protect herself. And the officer who came when she called for help was part of Rusk's unit. Find him, Elias told Haynes. Officer Voss was in my sister's house the night she died. The community center's empty parking lot gleamed under a single flickering light. Elias stood in the shadows, watching as a rusty sedan pulled in and parked far from the street lamps. Officer Caleb Voss stepped out, head swiveling in all directions. He looked nothing like the confident cop from the mall. His uniform was gone, replaced by a wrinkled hoodie and jeans. His eyes were bloodshot. You came alone? Voss asked, voice barely above a whisper. Avery's watching from over there. Elias nodded toward the attorney's car, parked across the lot with headlights off. Nobody followed you? I don't think so. Voss wiped sweat from his face despite the cold night air. I don't have much time. Rusk's been looking for me since I didn't show up for shift. Tell me about my sister, Elias said, his voice tight with restraint. Voss looked at the ground. We got the call that night. Suspicious person at the back door. Rusk wasn't even on duty, but he heard the address on the radio and told dispatch he'd handle it with me. Why would he do that? Elias asked. Because he already knew your sister. Voss swallowed hard. She'd been asking questions about incident reports at the mall. Rusk said we needed to scare her off before she caused trouble. Elias's fingers curled into fists. What happened when you got there? She was alive, scared, but standing right there in her kitchen. Voss's words tumbled out faster now. She looked at Rusk and said, I knew it would be you. Then she accused him of stealing a flash drive from her desk at work. Elias stepped closer. What drive? I don't know exactly. But Rusk got real angry. He told me to check the perimeter, make sure nobody else was around. Voss's voice cracked. I didn't want to leave her with him. But you don't say no to Rusk. So you left her alone with him. The accusation hung in the air between them. For 3 minutes, maybe 4. Voss's eyes filled with tears. When I came back in, she was at the bottom of the stairs. Rusk said she fell trying to run from us. Elias grabbed Voss by the collar, shoving him against the wall. Rage boiled through him like molten lead. You let him kill my sister. I didn't know he would hurt her, Voss gasped. I swear to God I thought he was just going to threaten her about the reports. Elias wanted to crush Voss's throat, to make him feel a fraction of what Lila must have felt. But through the fog of fury, he heard Avery's voice in his head. They will try to make you look unstable, vengeful, dangerous. With shaking hands, Elias released Voss and stepped back. She whispered something before she lost consciousness. Voss continued, rubbing his neck. She said, "Dale took the drive. That was it. Then the ambulance came, but she never woke up. And you said nothing," Elias spat. "You let them call it an accident. Rusk told me I'd go down as an accomplice if I talked." Voss's voice dropped to a whisper. "He's got dirt on everyone, but I can't live with it anymore. I'll testify about what happened. I promise." Distant headlights swept across the parking lot entrance. Voss flinched like a spooked animal. "That's Rusk's cruiser," he hissed. "He must have followed me." Before Elias could stop him, Voss bolted toward the trees behind the community center. The approaching car slowed, its spotlights sweeping the area. "Get down!" Avery called softly from nearby. Elias dropped behind a dumpster, waiting until the cruiser circled the lot twice, and finally drove away. When he stood, Voss was gone. "Did you get enough?" Avery asked, approaching with her phone in hand. "You recorded it?" She nodded. "Every word." Elias drove straight to Lila's house, his mind racing. The watch, the second receipt, the empty storage locker. Lila had been planning multiple backup systems. In the kitchen, he examined the repaired watch under the lamp. The backplate looked ordinary, but when he pressed the edge, it clicked open to reveal a tiny compartment. Inside was a micro SD card no larger than his fingernail. She knew they'd look for obvious storage, Elias said, as Avery connected the card to her laptop. The card contained audio files. The first played Gloria Pike's voice clearly. "We do not need real arrests. We need numbers." In another, Mayor Bryce said, "By summer, the corridor needs to look too troubled to save." "This is it," Avery said, eyes widening. Partial evidence, but enough to start formal proceedings. For the first time in days, hope flickered in Elias's chest. Lila got them after all. "I'll prepare an emergency filing first thing tomorrow." Avery downloaded copies to her secure server. This links Pike and Bryce directly to the harassment campaign. Half an hour later, Elias was driving home with the micro SD card secure in his pocket. The weight of grief lightened slightly with each mile. Lila hadn't died in vain. Her evidence would bring down the people who hurt her. Red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. A state police cruiser signaled for him to pull over. Elias complied, keeping his hands visible on the wheel. The officer approached cautiously. "Step out of the vehicle, sir." "What's the problem, officer?" Elias asked. Anonymous tip about a suspicious vehicle matching this description. The officer opened the car door. "I need to search the vehicle." "I don't consent to a search," Elias said firmly. The officer smiled thinly. "Sir, please step out now." 2 more officers appeared. They guided Elias to the patrol car, while the first officer searched his vehicle. Within minutes, the officer emerged holding a handgun in a gloved hand. "Unregistered firearm under the driver's seat," he announced. "You're under arrest." As they handcuffed him, Elias knew with absolute certainty the gun had been planted. The trap had sprung shut. The red and blue lights cut through the darkness, casting eerie shadows across the roadside. Elias stood with his back against the patrol car, handcuffs digging into his wrists. 3 state police cruisers blocked the road in both directions, their headlights creating a harsh spotlight. "This is absurd," Avery argued, her voice rising as she confronted the lead officer. "Mr. Boone is a federal investigator. You have no right to plant evidence and fabricate charges." The officer's face hardened. "Ma'am, step back or you'll be detained as well. We've recovered an unregistered firearm with filed-off serial numbers under the driver's seat of a vehicle that's been parked in public places all day," Avery shot back. "Convenient timing." A second officer approached, holding an evidence bag containing the gun. "Just got word from dispatch. Ballistics match a shooting outside the West Side Community Center 2 months ago. 1 victim, still in rehab." Elias felt his stomach drop. Not just any gun. A weapon linked to a local crime. The setup was more elaborate than he'd imagined. "This is a deliberate frame," Elias said, keeping his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. "I've never owned a gun like that. Never touched it." The lead officer smirked. "That's what they all say." Avery pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Colonel Haynes. This is obstruction of a federal investigation. Call whoever you want. Your Pentagon friend is going to lockup tonight." As they loaded Elias into the back of a patrol car, his mind raced through possibilities. Rusk, Pike, Bryce. Someone had orchestrated this perfectly. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. Right after they'd found evidence, right after Voss had admitted what happened to Lila. By morning, the damage was done. News vans parked outside the station where Elias spent the night before Avery arranged his release on bond. Headlines scrolled across TV screens in the station lobby. Pentagon official under investigation for weapons charge. Colonel Haynes met them outside, her face grim. "They're already using this to discredit everything we've found." "I didn't touch that gun," Elias said. "I know." Haynes handed him a folder. "But perception matters. Mayor Bryce is demanding we withdraw compromised personnel." Avery checked her phone. "The judge just delayed our emergency filing. She's citing concerns about evidence integrity." Haynes looked at Elias with regret. "I have to remove you from active participation, not because I believe this garbage, but because I need to protect the case." The words stung, but Elias understood the strategy. They're trying to make this about me instead of what happened to Lila and everyone else they hurt. Back at Ruthie's house, they found the front door ajar. Inside, drawers hung open, cushions slashed. Ruthie stood in her living room, shaking. "They took it," she whispered. "My notebook. All those years of notes. Gone." Elias helped her to a chair. "When did this happen?" "During church this morning. I was only gone an hour." Tears filled her eyes. "They're erasing us, aren't they? Erasing what we saw." When they tried to contact Voss, his phone was disconnected. His apartment stood empty. Clothes gone, drawers emptied. "He ran," Avery said. Or they made him run. By afternoon, Tessa received an official email. Her scholarship was suspended pending review of her disciplinary status. Her future held hostage by people with power and no conscience. That evening, Elias sat alone at Lila's kitchen table, the weight of the day crushing down on him. The micro SD card evidence felt insufficient now, their word against a system that had already labeled him a criminal. He held Lila's watch, turning it over in his hands. Something caught his eye. The watch had stopped at 8:17, not broken, deliberately set. Elias remembered Lila always had Bible verses for everything. 8:17 wasn't a time. "For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed," Elias whispered, recalling the verse from Luke 8:17 that Lila had quoted so often. He stared at the watch. Lila hadn't just left the micro SD card. She'd left a message, a final clue. The verse wasn't random. It was a direction. Elias sat up straight. Lila had been devoted to Fairbridge First Baptist for 40 years. She'd taught Sunday school, sung in the choir, and served on every committee. "The church," he said aloud, suddenly understanding. Lila wouldn't have trusted just one hiding place, not when she knew what was at stake. He looked at the watch again. 8:17, a verse about hidden things becoming known. Lila had left something else, something hidden in the last place they would look. The church where she'd spent every Sunday of her life. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of Fairbridge First Baptist Church, casting colorful patterns on the worn wooden pews. Elias, Tessa, and Avery stepped carefully through the quiet sanctuary, while Ruthie's voice carried from the pastor's office down the hall. "Pastor Williams, I've been thinking about updating our prayer circle contact list," Ruthie said loudly enough for the others to hear. "And I wanted to talk about that community garden idea for the East Lot." Tessa tugged at Elias's sleeve. "The display cases are in the history room," she whispered, pointing toward a doorway near the choir stands. They slipped into a small room lined with glass cabinets containing church memorabilia, faded photographs, offering plates from the 1930s, and programs from decades of Easter services. Against the back wall stood a special case labeled Founding Families Treasures. "There," Tessa pointed, her finger trembling slightly. "Aunt Lila's Bible is in there. She donated it 3 months ago for the Founders' Sunday celebration." The worn leather Bible sat behind glass, opened to Psalm 37. A small card beside it read, "Belonged to 4 generations of Boones. Donated by Lila Boone." "How do we get it?" Avery whispered, glancing toward the door. Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a church key. Lila was treasurer for 20 years. She kept a spare key on her ring. The cabinet opened with a soft click. Elias carefully lifted the Bible, handling it with reverence. Unlike modern Bibles, this one had a leather binding with a small hollow space where the spine connected to the cover. Elias gently probed the binding and felt something small and hard. "She hid it where anyone looking for evidence would never search," he said, working his fingers carefully along the spine. A tiny micro-SD card, smaller than his fingernail, slipped from the binding. Tessa's eyes widened. "She knew exactly what she was doing," Avery said, her voice filled with respect. They heard Ruthie's voice growing louder. "Oh, I should check if the history room needs dusting while I'm here," her signal that the pastor was approaching. They quickly replaced the Bible, locked the cabinet, and pretended to be admiring the church's historical photographs when Pastor Williams and Ruthie entered. "Brother Elias, I didn't know you were here," the pastor said, extending his hand. "I'm so sorry about all the trouble you've been having." "Just showing my niece some family history," Elias replied smoothly. "My sister loved this church. Lila was a blessing to us all," Pastor Williams said. "We miss her terribly." 20 minutes later, they gathered in Avery's hotel room. The attorney plugged the micro-SD card into her secured laptop as they crowded around the screen. "My God," Avery whispered as files populated the screen. Lila documented everything. The files were organized with meticulous care, folders labeled by date and content. There were complete recordings of clean corridor meetings where Pike, Rusk, and Mayor Bryce openly discussed fabricating incidents to drive down property values. Photos showed Rusk accepting envelopes from developers' representatives in parking lots. A copied dispatch log from the night of Lila's death showed the 911 call and response that had been deleted from official records. Most damning was a video from Lila's porch camera showing Rusk entering her house alone, then leaving 30 minutes later, glancing nervously over his shoulder. There was also audio from inside Lila's home. Apparently, she'd been recording when Rusk arrived. His voice was clear. "Nobody will believe an old woman with a grudge. Stop asking questions about the mall stops or things might get worse than a warning." The final file was simply labeled, "For Elias." Tessa reached for Elias's hand as he clicked play. Lila's face appeared on screen, her eyes tired but determined. She sat at her kitchen table, the same one where Elias had been sitting last night. "Elias, if you're seeing this, then I couldn't fight them anymore," she began. "I know you'll blame yourself for not being here. Don't waste time grieving what you couldn't prevent." She explained how she'd discovered the connection between the mall security lists and the redevelopment plans, how the police were creating the very crime problem they claimed to be fighting. "I tried going through channels," she continued. "Nobody listened. An old black woman complaining about police? They patted my hand and showed me the door." Her eyes hardened. "They're hurting people, Elias. Not just with arrests. They're stealing homes, futures, dignity. Make them answer in daylight, brother. Not in quiet rooms where they can hide. In public, where everyone can see." The video ended. Silence filled the room. Colonel Haynes arrived an hour later, reviewing the evidence with growing certainty. "This is more than enough for federal warrants," she said. "We can move on all of them by tonight." But Avery shook her head. "If we do this quietly, Bryce will spin it. The town needs to see the truth with their own eyes." "What are you suggesting?" Haynes asked. "Mayor Bryce is holding his big clean corridor announcement tomorrow at Fairbridge Commons," Tessa said. "Everyone will be there. The press, the developers, All the city officials. The same place they forced me to my knees, Elias said quietly. Avery nodded. The same place we make them face what they've done. That afternoon, federal agents quietly secured positions around Fairbridge Commons before Mayor Bryce's public redevelopment event began. They wore plain clothes, blending with the gathering crowd. Some posed as reporters, others as maintenance workers. 2 agents, disguised as mall security, stood near the temporary stage erected at the entrance. Another leaned against a light pole, pretending to check his phone while surveying the growing audience. Avery Sloane positioned herself near the sound booth, speaking quietly with the technician. The young man nodded, recognizing his grandmother's friend Ruthie in the description Avery provided. Colonel Haynes remained in her vehicle, coordinating the operation through an earpiece while reviewing the final warrants on her tablet. The parking lot transformed into a public forum. Rows of folding chairs faced the stage, where a Clean Corridor Initiative banner flapped in the cold breeze. The same spot, where Elias had knelt on rough pavement, was now covered by a red carpet leading to the podium. Store owners and employees gathered near the mall entrance, some curious, others concerned about what another redevelopment phase might mean for their businesses. Mayor Nolan Bryce arrived in a black town car, waving to the crowd with practiced charm. He wore an expensive overcoat and a campaign-ready smile, shaking hands as he made his way toward the stage. Gloria Pike stood at the edge of the gathering, her sharp eyes scanning for problems, unaware that the real threat came from the evidence, not protesters. "Beautiful day for Fairbridge's future," Bryce told a local reporter. "This expansion will bring jobs and safety to neighborhoods that desperately need both." Sergeant Dale Rusk appeared in full uniform, despite being under investigation. He stationed himself near the stage, chest puffed with authority. The paid leave had lasted less than 48 hours, just long enough for the news cycle to move on. He nodded to several officers positioned throughout the crowd, his confidence restored now that Elias had been publicly discredited. Tessa arrived with 2 federal agents who kept a respectful distance. She found Ruthie Bell near the back row and stood beside her, refusing to hide despite the school principal watching from across the lot. The older woman squeezed Tessa's hand. "Your aunt would be so proud," Ruthie whispered. "I'm scared," Tessa admitted. "That's how you know it matters," Ruthie replied. The ceremony began with the high school band playing the national anthem. Mayor Bryce took the stage to enthusiastic applause from developers and city officials in the front row. He spoke about revitalizing troubled areas and ensuring public safety through strategic investment. The crowd shifted uneasily when he mentioned removing elements that discourage economic growth. Then Elias Boone entered from the mall entrance, walking slowly but purposefully through the parting crowd. He wore a simple dark suit and carried Lila's repaired watch in his hand. People whispered, recognizing him from the news. Some pointed. Others stepped back. Sergeant Rusk noticed the disturbance and moved quickly to intercept Elias before he could reach the stage. He positioned himself directly in Elias's path, hand resting near his holster. "You are not welcome here," Rusk said, voice low but hostile. Elias stopped, maintaining a calm expression. "That's what this whole thing has been about, isn't it? Who's welcome, and who isn't?" Several phones rose to record the confrontation. Rusk stepped closer, using his body to block Elias from the stage. "You should have stayed on your knees," Rusk sneered, loud enough for nearby attendees to hear. The crowd gasped. A reporter turned her microphone toward them. Mayor Bryce paused mid-sentence, noticing the disturbance. Elias didn't raise his voice or show anger. Instead, he replied clearly, ensuring everyone nearby could hear, "You put me on my knees because you thought humiliation was power. But power is not making a man kneel. Power is what he stands up with." Cameras clicked. People moved closer. Tessa's hand tightened around Ruthie's. "You're trespassing," Rusk said, reaching for Elias's wrist. "You're under arrest for violating—" Before he could finish, Colonel Deborah Haynes stepped from the crowd, her federal identification held high. Department of Defense Inspector General, Haynes announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Step back, Sergeant Rusk." Rusk hesitated, his fingers still gripping Elias's wrist. Two federal agents moved into position behind him. "I said step back," Haynes repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. Rusk released Elias, but didn't retreat. This man has no business disrupting a public event. While attention focused on Haynes and Rusk, Avery Sloane moved swiftly through the crowd toward the stage. She climbed the steps confidently, her federal credentials visible on a lanyard. Mayor Bryce was mid-sentence when he noticed her approach. "Excuse me," he said into the microphone, forcing a smile. "This portion of the program isn't quite—" Avery reached for the microphone. "Federal Attorney Avery Sloane, I need to address this gathering immediately." Bryce's face hardened. He gestured to a technician at the soundboard. "Cut the mic." The young man behind the equipment glanced up, then looked past Bryce toward the crowd. His eyes found Ruthie Bell, who gave him a small, firm nod. The technician's grandmother had been one of Ruthie's closest friends for 30 years. "Sorry, sir," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Systems locked in." Avery took the microphone from Bryce's hand. "Citizens of Fairbridge, I'm here on behalf of the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. What you're about to hear was recorded during meetings about your community's future." She held up a small device and pressed play. The speakers crackled. Then Gloria Pike's voice filled the parking lot. "We do not need real arrests. We need numbers. Every incident report builds the case for redevelopment." Pike froze near the security entrance, her face draining of color. Avery pressed another button. Mayor Bryce's voice emerged next. "By summer, the corridor needs to look too troubled to save. The acquisition team can't move until the property values drop another 15%. The crowd stirred, confusion turning to shock as they recognized their mayor's voice. Bryce lunged for Avery, but a federal agent blocked his path. The final recording was the most damning. Sergeant Rusk's voice, cold and threatening. "Nobody will believe an old woman with a grudge. The drive disappears, you forget what you saw, and maybe you don't have an accident on those stairs." A woman gasped. Someone shouted, "That's Lila's house!" The crowd's shock transformed into fury as the truth dawned on them. Ruthie Bell stepped forward, her voice carrying despite her age. "We tried to tell you. For 3 years, we tried to tell you what was happening." Other seniors and veterans moved forward too, forming a line beside her. "They banned my grandson for waiting for my prescriptions," called an elderly woman. "Searched my truck 4 times in 2 months," added a gray-haired veteran with a cane. "Told me my lease wouldn't be renewed unless I sold it back cheap," said a black business owner. During the commotion, a police cruiser pulled up, and Officer Caleb Voss emerged, flanked by federal protection. He looked terrified, but determined as he approached the gathering. "Officer Voss has provided sworn testimony," Haynes announced. "Tell them what you told us, officer." Voss stepped forward, voice shaking. "Sergeant Rusk ordered me to falsify reports targeting specific residents. And I was with him at Lila Boone's house the night she died. He sent me outside to check the perimeter. When I came back in, she was at the bottom of the stairs." The crowd's angry murmur grew louder. "This morning," Haynes continued, "federal agents executed a search warrant on a storage unit registered to Sergeant Rusk under a false name. Inside, we found confiscated phones, cash envelopes, illegal weapons, Ruthie Bell's stolen notebook, and the original drive removed from Lila Boone's evidence locker." She pointed toward a woman trying to slip away through the crowd. "And that woman, who accused Mr. Boone of theft at the mall, is on Sergeant Rusk's payroll. She's filed false complaints against 7 other citizens targeted by the Clean Corridor Plan." The woman stopped, trapped by the crowd's attention. Rusk's face contorted with rage as he realized his entire operation was exposed. With nowhere to run and nothing left to lose, he lunged toward Elias with a roar of fury. "You ruined everything!" he shouted. But he never reached his target. 3 federal agents tackled him to the pavement. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the handcuffs clicked around Rusk's wrists, in the exact spot where he had forced Elias to kneel days before. Gloria Pike shoved past a technician, her heels clicking frantically as she headed for the back of the stage. Mayor Bryce was already there, his practiced smile replaced by naked panic as he yanked open the door to his waiting town car. "Drive!" he snapped at his assistant, but the car wouldn't start. When Bryce looked up, Avery Sloan stood blocking his escape, flanked by federal agents. "Mayor Nolan Bryce," she said, her voice carrying to the crowd, "you're under arrest for conspiracy against civil rights, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and public corruption." Pike tried to slip around the stage, but two agents intercepted her. "Gloria Pike, you're under arrest for the same charges, plus falsifying security reports and conspiracy to commit fraud." News cameras swiveled from Rusk on the ground to the mayor in handcuffs. The redevelopment executives huddled near their presentation boards, looking for exits, but agents were already handing them warrants for their records and devices. "This is outrageous," Bryce sputtered, as cameras zoomed in. "I've served this town for 20 years. "Yes," Elias said, stepping forward. "And now you'll answer for how you served it." Fairbridge Police Chief Warren appeared, ashen-faced, as Colonel Haynes approached him with a federal notice. "Your department is now under federal review," she announced. "These officers are suspended immediately pending investigation." She handed him a list of names. Several officers removed their badges on the spot, surrendering them to federal agents. Tessa watched wide-eyed beside Ruthie, who squeezed the girl's hand. "Your aunt did this," Ruthie whispered. "She made them answer in daylight, just like she wanted." The aftermath unfolded over weeks, each day bringing new revelations and consequences. The hearings began immediately. Evidence from Lila's hidden cards exposed not just harassment, but a systematic effort to manufacture crime statistics. Records showed Rusk's unit had issued over 300 false trespass notices in 2 years, targeting black seniors, disabled veterans, and working families living near the mall. Within days, the Clean Corridor redevelopment deal collapsed. Investors withdrew, unwilling to be associated with what newspapers now called the Fairbridge conspiracy. Property owners who had been pressured to sell were given options to repurchase their land or receive fair market compensation. Every trespass order issued by Rusk's unit was voided. Families banned from the mall for loitering or suspicious behavior received formal apologies and compensation packages. The mall's new management publicly committed to rebuilding trust with the community. The Fairbridge Police Department entered federal oversight under a 5-year consent decree requiring body cameras, independent complaint review, and training reforms. 7 officers faced criminal charges for falsifying reports and evidence tampering. At Fairbridge High School, the principal resigned after emails showed he targeted Tessa's scholarship on direct orders from Mayor Bryce's office. Tessa's college recommendations were not only reinstated but upgraded after 3 universities reached out specifically requesting the student who helped expose Fairbridge corruption. Gloria Pike faced additional charges when mall employees came forward with recordings of her ordering security to target the undesirables and clear out anyone who doesn't look like they belong. Ruthie Bell's documentation proved crucial in court. The mall's new owners asked her to chair a community oversight board to rebuild relationships with senior citizens and veteran groups. Her first act was establishing free transportation for elderly shoppers who had been afraid to visit for years. 6 weeks after Rusk's arrest, hundreds gathered in the Fairbridge Commons parking lot, the same spot where Elias had been forced to his knees. But today, they assembled for a dedication. A modest brick building adjacent to the mall, previously a vacant shop, had been renovated and bore a new sign: the Lila Boone Justice Center, providing legal aid for seniors and veterans. Elias stood at the podium, no longer kneeling, no longer silenced. The Pentagon had granted him extended leave to help establish the center. "My sister believed that truth matters more than power," he told the crowd. She knew that sometimes justice doesn't arrive on its own. Sometimes we must stand together and demand it in daylight. Colonel Haynes sat in the front row beside Avery, who had been appointed special prosecutor for the ongoing cases. Behind them sat dozens of community members whose stories now formed part of the federal record. People who had been harassed, threatened, and pushed aside, but never broken. After the speeches, Tessa approached Elias with a small box. "The jeweler finished it," she said, opening the box to reveal Lila's watch, fully repaired. "He said the mechanism was fine. It just needed cleaning and winding." Elias took the watch. It was running now, the hands pointing to 8:17. He smiled through tears. She set it deliberately to that time. It's from her favorite Bible verse. "For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed," Tessa quoted softly. Elias fastened the watch around his wrist and looked up at the Justice Center bearing his sister's name. He stood exactly where he had once knelt in humiliation, but now the ground beneath his feet felt different, consecrated by truth finally told in full daylight. "She was right," Elias said, his voice steady despite his emotion. "Nothing hidden stayed hidden." If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.